Welcome back to the Bonsai Builders Podcast. I'm your host, Addison Galambos. In our search for mastery, we often talk about being a generalist, knowing a bit of everything, but some of the most profound displays of mastery come from those who go incredibly deep into a single niche. My guest today is a legend in the American South and the man who literally wrote the book on one of the most iconic native species. Randy Bennett is a successor to Von Banting, the man widely considered the father of bold Cypress Bonsai. Randy has been at the forefront of defining what this species can be. So we're going to talk about his journey, kind of his influences, and what it actually takes to master a niche. So Randy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So you've been in the game for over 3 decades. Take us back to that, first experience you had. What kind of was the spark for you that made you realize that bonsai was something that you really wanted to get into?
Well, first, it's been over 5 decades, but who's counting?
Holy moly.
Yeah, 55 years. I started bonsai in 1971. For those people who, run out of fingers and toes, that's a long time. But my father was the one who actually got me started, sparked that interest. I had an interest in gardening, oddly enough, and my mom was an interior decorator, and she had a book on Japanese gardens, and I'd never seen anything like that before, and I was fascinated. And I used to sketch some of the architectural features in the book, and my dad just noticed me always doodling these Oriental sketches, and there happened to be an Oriental gentleman at his work who would bring one to his office periodically and sit on his desk for a few days at a time. And so one day he just showed up with a little Japanese maple in a bonsai pot as a gift for me, and that was it. I was hooked. From that, I started digging up my mom's bushes. I started doing anything I could to try to learn bonsai. Interesting little side note: there was at that time really almost nothing in writing on bonsai, and I went to the library to find out more about it. Our local library didn't have any books on bonsai, but they said, the main library downtown in New Orleans has one. We can order that book, and it'll be here in a couple of weeks. I said, never mind. I got on the city bus and went down that day. I checked out that book, brought it home, just was reading it over and over and over again. Still have the book, about $3,000 in library fines. But and I'm sorry, but I could not return that book. It was too important to me to learn about bonsai, and that was the only guide I had at the time. So anyway, I hope the librarians forgive me, but I've still got that book.
Oh, that's so funny. Well, I bet they're happy that that passion for bonsai was ignited through the library. So when you first started doing bonsai, you said Japanese maple was one of your first trees. Did you start on kind of traditional Japanese species, or were those accessible near you, or were you using local stuff?
You use everything that you can. When you're first starting out, you're trying everything. And at the time, it was a wonderful experience, but it was a horrible experience at the same time, because there were no bonsai pots that you could go and buy. There was no wire that you could go buy, no tools. I could see the description of these things in the book, but there was no place locally to go buy that sort of thing. So I was using all the wrong pots, but I would go to the nursery. I would buy nursery plants and try different species, killing just about everything I laid my hands on, as so many people do. Yeah, I kept after it until I found my wife. I had just gotten married, and my wife opened up the newspaper. They had the newspaper at one time. It wasn't all on the internet. And she said, there's a bonsai show downtown at one of the hotels on Canal Street. I was already in the car. And so we drove downtown, and I was mesmerized. Here were all these to me, just absolutely gorgeous trees. I probably stood in front of this one bald cypress for 30 minutes, just analyzing every detail of it. Turns out it was one of Dave DeGroot's trees that was in the exhibit. And of course, I joined the Greater New Orleans Bonsai Society on the spot. Okay. And that's when it really took off for me. That's when I really was able to start learning about bonsai.
Was Dave living near there at that time? How did he end up showing in that?
Oh yeah, no, Dave lived here for many years. He and Vaughn Banting were best friends. In fact, when I joined the club that day, like a week later, David, for those people who had just joined the club through this convention, offered a 6-week beginner course on bonsai. So, I was there every time, for every meeting, soaking up every single word he said. He was an excellent, excellent teacher. And then later, on occasion, he, Vaughn, or both of them would invite me over to their houses, usually to pull weeds. You weren't trusted to actually work on the trees, but, you could pull weeds and you could ask questions and you could talk about bonsai. And for me, that was great. I loved it. I loved it. Fell in love with it.
Interesting. So I imagine it was very difficult to start whenever you didn't have, you couldn't buy copper wire off the shelf or even aluminum wire,
Right.
You're dealing with tools that are, the needle nose pliers that you found in your workshop as opposed to, bonsai specific tools. That's really interesting. Yeah. In the Bay Area, where I live right now, there's a long history of bonsai actually, right? Like a lot of Japanese Americans kind of moved over. And so there was a little bit more infrastructure, right? And just being closer to Japan, there's probably easier importing and all sorts of stuff for trees and tools and knowledge. But on, American South is about as far away as you can get from Japan and still be in the US. So
yeah, exactly.
So was it leaders like Dave and Vaughn who were kind of helping bring knowledge of bonsai to the area, or like who were the kind of main teachers?
Well, like
Vaughn,
Vaughn was he was trying to get the local club started, the Greater New Orleans Bonsai Society, and he actually organized it and got it off the ground in 1972. But prior to that, John Naka would come in quite frequently. He would stay at Vaughn's house for like a week, and sun up to sundown, whoever wanted to show up was there learning bonsai. John was teaching, everything that he could. So Vaughn's background was in traditional Japanese bonsai. And then, we continued to have in some of John's students, like people like Ben Oki. There were other artists that we'd bring in, Warren Hill, Chase Rosad, the list goes on and on. But Vaughn was really, and his wife Donna, who was really big into bonsai as well, worked really hard to get in some of the top people in the country to strengthen the club and really provide a good foundation for people who wanted to learn bonsai.
Oh, very cool. So a lot of it was through the club then, like the education of the region, they took that very seriously and brought in some good people.
Oh, yeah.
That's really cool to hear a lot of those names that, I'm familiar with as well. Like, it seems like they did have a big impact on kind of the American bonsai scene, not just their local areas where they lived,
Oh, yeah.
Which is cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how did your relationship with the club change over time? It sounds like as soon as you first had your first, touch point with them at the show, you joined. Mm-hmm. But, did you ever, get involved in leadership of the club or start teaching classes, or like what kind of, how did that evolve over time?
Yeah, anybody that showed any kind of interest, Vaughn and Donna weren't going to let them get away. So you got wrangled into doing, programs and so forth. I hadn't been in the club just a few months, and Vaughn said, I want you to do a program for the club one night. And I'm like, Vaughn, I've only been a member of the, y'all have been doing bonsai and know a heck of a lot. No, just pick a species that you're familiar with. You'll do fine. Really want you to get up here and do a program. I decided, well, I'll do something on Chinese elms. Who can go wrong with Chinese elms? So I stood up there and I had all my because I was a teacher at the time. I was a middle school teacher. So I had my note cards. I'm all prepared. I'm standing at the podium. I'm going through my note cards. And all of a sudden, the audience started laughing. And I'm like, okay, I didn't say anything funny. At least I don't think I said anything crazy or out of the ordinary. Then the laughter would die down. And I would continue, and a few moments later, the laughter would start up again. Okay, is is my zipper down? It's like, it's like, okay, I got to subtly check that behind the podium. Okay, no, I'm good. It just kept going. And I just finally just had to just keep ignoring it and keep rolling. Finally, at the end of the night, somebody came up and they were, oh, good job. Oh, look, do you know why everybody was laughing? I said, no. Vaughn was in the back with a laser pointer. And every once in a while, he would just bring it down and put a red dot in the center of your forehead. Well, I mean, Vaughn was just a big practical joker. And I mean, and he came up to me afterwards. He said, oh, you did a great job. And I was like, yeah, but what about the red dot? He's, oh, look, you did great. He says, you just got to put up with me. I've got a warped sense of humor.
That's funny.
But he was like that. He was always playing practical jokes.
Yeah. Well, it's good to keep the audience on their toes too. That's funny.
Yeah,
That's trial by fire, though. Getting pushed into teaching a demo, teaching a bonsai class your first few months. That's pretty funny. Yeah,
but I've been president several times, newsletter editor. I've just done a lot of things over the years, and the club have always been a part of the club, and just a very active member and trying to continue to see it to grow.
Yeah, it makes sense, and you rely on that distribution of experience levels within the club to help drive, the continuation of it, right? So I felt like maybe it's a thing about bonsai clubs, but the second that the board notices somebody with a little bit of interest, they'll grab you and you're not getting away. That was how it happened for me at my local club. But
yeah. That's great, though. That's great. Yeah. Tap into the talent.
Yeah. But we might need to try that. That might be a new board initiative we have, is to get new members to present within the first few months. That's pretty clever. Well, I'm sure you learned a lot practicing for it, and the information was good, as long as you prepare. So.
Well, and he and Dono both were always pushing me and other people in the club who were interested, to do more, step it up. And it would push you to do more study, do more research, make sure that you knew what you were talking about. We're going to do a styling program over at such and such nursery. We want you to come over there, and people from the nursery are going to you can help them go out into the nursery, select a tree. We'll do a styling fee, and then they'll buy the bonsai pot from the nursery, and then we'll sit there and we'll talk about it and style this tree for them. And then that was another way of, getting members to join the club and so forth. Yeah. But there was always activities to pushing you to get involved in, which was great.
Yeah, whenever you look back at the people who've had the biggest impact on your journey in bonsai, what are the kind of characteristics of those people? Like, is there a certain mindset, or always adding in practical jokes and keeping it fun? Or what should we be on the lookout for in ourselves to help perpetuate that next kind of generation of bonsai artists?
Yeah.
How can we have that impact?
Yeah, I think it's just, you've got to have, and all the people that motivated me, they had a desire to learn, a desire to share, a desire to teach. They wanted to share their passion. They were incredibly dedicated to the art of bonsai, and that was almost like infectious. You would just pick up on that enthusiasm, and it felt great then. Sometimes just talking about Vaughn and David, there were times when I would be asked to come over to one of their houses, and the two of them would be sitting there, I will say, generally discussing a tree. To me, it was like an argument, but let's be nice and say that they were generally discussing the tree. But they would debate one another over how tall the tree should be, where the branches should be, the structure of the tree. Well, this is a deciduous tree. We're not going to style it like a black pine. We're going to style it like it grows in nature. These were the kinds of discussions that I just sat back like a little, in the corner, just listening, never participating, but just soaking it up like a sponge. And there's just all those types of conversations. I still remember to this day, after 55 years of doing bonsai, they were very instrumental in shaping my thoughts and my enthusiasm about bonsai.
Yeah, it makes sense. I was talking with someone yesterday for another podcast episode, and we were talking about that idea of sometimes, there are a lot of solitary elements of bonsai, right? Where, you're sitting there and you're wiring, or, there's a lot of aspects where you kind of do it alone. But the most fun aspects for us, at least, and the aspects that help push us the most are sometimes whenever we're doing it with friends, right? So
Right.
I think that captures that perfectly of, you were having your opinions and your eye and your design shape sensed by or influenced by these conversations you were hearing, and then they were probably bouncing those ideas off each other and improving their approach to creating bonsai.
And Vaughn, when he actually started a study group with a number of us who were just really gung-ho into bonsai. And so we would meet at his house, and he would pull up this tree, this piece of raw stock. Everybody gets a chopstick, okay? Put the chopstick where you think the front of the tree should be. Defend your position. Why do you think it should be there? Okay, well, if that's the front, then where's the... Tell me what the branch structure should be. So you'd get into these discussions, and sometimes you'd have an opinion and you'd hear somebody else's thoughts and somebody else's rationale, and you go, oh, well, that makes more sense than what I said. I like this guy's idea. I'm gonna change my opinion and go with his chopstick. Vaughn had this study group going for years and years, got more and more advanced into techniques and so forth. So I learned so much from that. So I do the same thing now. So I have a number of people that come to my house every month. We work on trees. There's every level from beginner to more advanced people, but it's all fun. It's a big learning experience, and hopefully, I'm able to provide some of that kind of motivation that was supplied to me and pass it on.
Yeah. Well, I get a lot of energy from talking to you, and this is our first time meeting, so I'm sure people are inspired. I saw some cool photos actually when I was looking you up of you kind of in a classroom setting with a big bald cypress in front of you, kind of explaining the tree. It was pretty cool. So it seems like a fun place to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How have you seen bonsai change over the past 55 years? Like the demographics, the number of people doing it, the prices, the knowledge, like where have you seen the biggest changes?
Some of the biggest changes are things like, how should I put this? There are things that I kind of took for granted when I was learning from people like Vaughn and David, and I just thought this was the way everybody did bonsai. But I have since found out, really in more recent years, that no, that was kind of the exception to the rule, because especially like with Vaughn and David were very big on styling trees the way they grew in nature. And that's not the way bonsai is taught. In bonsai, you're taught, well, you find the line of the tree. Okay, we want to build taper. So we find the trunk, we find a line to go up into, and then first branch, second branch, back branch. We start building the structure of the tree. But Vaughn spent his entire lifetime trying to get people to accept the way bald cypresses, for instance, grew in nature, what a mature tree looked like, the flat top. He was scoffed at, he was laughed at. Visiting bonsai masters from Japan would come over, they would look at his tree and go, just dismiss it out of hand. This is trash. This is junk. But he was trying to design trees the way they looked in nature. And wasn't that the whole point of bonsai, was to create a miniature version of what an ancient tree would look like? It wasn't until Masahiko Kimura came to Vaughn's house and asked to be photographed with one of Vaughn's flat tops that Vaughn finally said, okay, I don't care what the rest of the world says. Now, if Kimura likes my tree, I feel like I've made it.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool.
And so I've always looked at designing trees the way they grew it in nature. And I never really thought that was a controversial thing. But now with the advent of the internet, and there's so much more communication, I have found that, there's a lot of dissent out there. There's these two camps. There's like traditional, classical bonsai people, and they really frown upon this naturalistic approach. I never knew about that conflict out there. I just thought that's the way I had been taught since day one, and I just thought that's the way everybody did it. So that's been kind of enlightening in recent years to see that. And to understand that. And it's, like I said, it's something that Dave was big on that too. I remember a program that he did probably back in the early 90s, just on deciduous style and all of the different shapes, canopy shapes and branch structural shapes that deciduous trees can have by nature of their genetics and what they look like in nature. And that, you don't have to follow this cookie cutter pattern of first branch, second branch. They can be any number of canopy shapes and so forth. And trunk shapes. So anyway, some of those early experiences to me is really what helped shape the way that I do bonsai.
Yeah. Well, and I think the most important thing is do you like what your trees look like, right? So, or does it capture your interest and imagination, right? Whatever style you're going to do, hopefully you like it and you're not just doing it because it's the right way or the wrong way, right?
Right.
So.
Right. Yeah.
So can you take me through a little bit, or one thing I want to dive a little deeper into with you is bald cypress, for example, is not a Japanese tree species, and maybe there's an analog in Japan, but you have to learn different techniques. There's different design based on, hey, this tree grows differently than nature, and might have different influences on that natural form, from the natural form on the actual design you target. So can you take me through, how do you even start learning with a new species how to fit it to bonsai, I guess? How do you discover those horticultural techniques that work? How do you explore different styles?
Well, I think that, let me preface what I was going to say by this. About 2 years ago, I had one of my students who had been after me for about 2 years to start a Facebook group on bald cypress. It's I don't do Facebook, all this social media. No. I just not interested. Don't do it. He hounded me for 2 years. You need to do this. You need to do this. So I did, and I guess it's been about 2 years since it started up now. I was amazed. If this is a species that is native to the United States and mainly in the deep South, although it does follow waterways and tributaries all the way up into Illinois and in Indiana and over to Oklahoma and up the East Coast. But all of a sudden there were people in Australia, in South Africa, in Malaysia, in Israel, in Great Britain, in Canada. I'm going, Canada? What are you people, how are you growing bald cypress in Canada? Oh, we're growing them in greenhouses. It's oh my God. The number of people growing bald cypresses in Australia blew me away. I said, where are you guys getting this material? And their trees looked fabulous. Oh, we've been growing them for seed for 30 years. I'm going, good night. I had no idea. And because they have no model in nature to look at, they were growing them. I have had people post the most gorgeous bald cypress root over rock, windswept, cascades, you name it. Because, there is a certain way that they tend to grow in nature, but like so many other species, like Chinese elm, it's so adaptable. And if you learn certain horticultural techniques, like how to get the leaf structures down to 1/2 inch in length on a bald cypress, then anything goes. And so there's weeping styles. Like I said, they're windswept. It was just, when I saw the first windswept bald cypress, I was blown away. I said, look at this. This is incredible. And it was a beautiful tree. But they were doing it because they didn't know any better. That's not really a fair thing to say, that they didn't know any better. But they didn't have any guides, mature guides in nature to see what they looked like.
Totally.
So 25, 30 years ago, they just started using it as interesting material to work with and creating every style imaginable with it. And that's to me is the most beautiful thing and the most interesting thing about bald cypress. It doesn't have to be styled into a flat top. It doesn't have to be styled into anything. You can use it in any way that you as an artist see fit. And that's
very cool.
That's the beautiful part of it. That species and the other species that are so adaptable like that.
Interesting. I didn't realize that, the adaptability of it gives it a lot of versatility and probably made it a good bonsai species to practice or to to experiment on, right? Because it could go so many ways.
Well, and because it's so forgiving. You cannot kill it by overwatering it like you can so many other things. I mean, it thrives. I mean, if most of the stuff I killed early on was because I loved it to death. I watered it and it would just get root rot, and that was the end of it. But, bald cypress, you can't, it's almost indestructible, and they grow very quickly. And so you can, if you really work with it, you can get a lot of results, great results, very, very quickly.
Yeah. That's I guess one thing. I grew up in Pennsylvania, like Pittsburgh area, and there was a guy that field grew bonsai trees. And when I was in high school or whatever, one of the first trees I bought 2 trees from him from his field. I bought one bald cypress and I bought one honey locust.
Interesting.
Yeah, and those were, for whatever reason, just the species that spoke to me. And I mean, I think there's so much cool appeal to bald cypress as an American native, and you can't beat the cool knees. And like I've always really been partial to kind of like the upright form of trees, like stuff that looks like a redwood or a bald cypress.
Right.
Like those always are really interesting to me. So you get this really cool taper, you get these cool knees. So I think it's like no wonder that it captures so many people worldwide, because it is a really cool tree.
Yeah, and that's there's a lot of different aspects to learn about it, and the whole reason that I decided to write the book was really because of Vaughn. The whole thing was a tribute to him, because what I saw over the years, initially nobody accepted flat top bald cypress. They just laughed at it. This is ridiculous. What is this thing even doing in an exhibit? And over the course of a generation, it has changed to where now a lot of times when you see bald cypresses in exhibits, they're all flat tops. And if it's in a conical shape, then people say, oh, well, what's that? That's not how mature bald cypresses look. You're supposed to be doing a mature. That's great. I love that. That we've come that far is a big plus. But so many people had forgotten over the years the teachings that Vaughn put forth about the structure and how these flat tops form. And so when I looked at what people were creating and calling a flat top bald cypress, I just kind of looked at it and goes, you really don't understand how these things grow in nature. You don't understand how the branch structure forms. And so that's why I wanted to write that book, was to make sure that Vaughn's teachings and that what Vaughn spent a lifetime doing as my main mentor and teacher did not get forgotten. And that was my whole purpose. Now, since then, it's kind of gotten me down the rabbit hole, because now everybody who calls me to do a program at their club or at their convention want me to do bald cypress. Well, that's okay. I don't mind. I love it. But I do enjoy doing other species.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Like, you're like, from the outside looking in, probably a lot of people go, oh, Randy equals bald cypress, and that's all they want to talk to you about. But I'm sure, or like, it sounds like you also enjoy other aspects of bonsai. So it's
Absolutely.
not like that's your only specialty area. That was, you wrote that book to honor your mentor and keep that knowledge alive. And it is a specialty area for you, but it's not, it's not your end all be all for bonsai.
Well, and it doesn't matter what the species is. You have to learn the basics. You have to learn, before you can run, you have to learn to crawl, then you have to learn to walk, and then you walk fast, and then you jog, and at some point you start running. You have to learn all of the basics of classical bonsai. There's a reason why it's structured the way it is and why it's taught the way it. And that's invaluable to every bonsai artist out there. You can't just all of a sudden, without any foundation, start doing bonsai. You have to have a strong foundation. And so, but I'd had my own bonsai nursery for almost 20 years. Bennett's Bonsai Nursery, operated that since the mid-'80s until 2005, when Hurricane Katrina took away. It taught me a very valuable lesson. I had over 200 trees in my personal collection that after Katrina no longer existed. So I actually took a 5-year break from bonsai because I lost trees that I had been growing since the 70s that I had, and they become almost like children. You spend so much time raising them, developing them, training them, feeding them, caring for them, and then to have something like a hurricane wipe them all out. So for 5 years, I didn't do bonsai. After a few weeks, I started digging a hole in the backyard, and my wife said, "What are you doing?" "Don't worry about it. I'm digging a hole. Don't worry about it." The hole kept getting bigger and deeper, and finally it was looked like taking up half the backyard. "Okay, you've got to tell me what in the world you're doing, digging this big hole." "Okay, I'm putting in a koi pond. I'm building a deck. It's going to be cantilevered over the koi pond, and there's going to be a bridge that's going over there, and I'm going to build a Japanese tea house in the traditional style of Japanese carpentry. I'm not going to use any nails, any screws. It's all going to be mortise and tenon and put together with pegs, and leave me alone." And so that was my therapy for losing all of my trees. And when I finished that, I built the tea house and I got everything done, and then I enjoyed it for a while, and I said, "Okay, I'm ready to go collect my first tree. I'm getting back into bonsai now. I've overcome my grief, and so I'm ready." So I went out into the swamp and I collected this large bald cypress. In fact, it was the one that I took to Rochester in September and won finest North American species bonsai with. So that was a special tree for me, and so to get that recognition at Rochester in the Nationals was really awesome for me. Well, I can't even express how meaningful that was.
Yeah. Well, and then and to do it with the species that,
Yeah.
meant so much to you.
Right.
And a tree literally that meant so much to you too.
Yep.
I can't even imagine losing my collection like that. That's horrifying. How did your life change after, not having bonsai? There's a lot of things that open up for you suddenly, right? Like it's easier to travel, or, you can less time at the house. So did you feel like your life changed at all after the loss of your bonsai trees?
I don't know that my life, I filled it with work, Like I said, until I was ready to get back into it. What bonsai is like crack. You get hooked. You can't get started. Once it gets in your blood, it becomes a part of you. You can't just quit it. You can't dismiss it. It's that monkey is on your back, and it's not going away, thank goodness. And so, when I was ready, I was able to get back in. And, there were blessings from, I don't know if I should say that's maybe not the best word to use, but when I got back into bonsai, I said, okay, it was a mistake to have 200 trees. I was running a bonsai mail order business. I was maintaining personal collections of other people's trees. Had 200 of my own. Most of mine looked terrible most of the time because I was spending so much time on other people's collections and other people's trees. And so when Hurricane Katrina made me start over, I said, okay, I want to have maybe about 25 trees in my collection, but I want them to be of much higher quality. I want to take the time to select the right material so that every tree in my collection I can be exceedingly proud of.
Yeah.
That was important to me. And so, do I still have countless projects on the side of the house that may never amount to anything? Yeah, I do. I'll donate them to the club auction. I'll give something away to somebody that's just trying to learn this species or that. But I do have a number of trees that I am now exceedingly proud of. They've finally attaining what I've always wanted to attain in bonsai. It's been very important to me.
Yeah, that kind of evolution of your practice makes a lot of sense. I also have the inclination to, I'm just looking out at my collection over there. I also tend to, the best thing about seedlings is they have infinite potential, But they grow up quick, and then, you start with 20 seedlings in a seedling tray, and then that's 21-gallon pots, and then it's 25-gallon pots or whatever, or you need the ground and
and I had 5 acres north of New Orleans. I had 5 acres where I had a 90-foot hoop house. I was field growing stock. I was committed big time to bonsai from early on in the 80s, developing material and but it's all taught me a lot of valuable lessons over the years. Everything is a constant learning process. And I think that's probably one of the things that I have loved most about bonsai, coming to understand it. You never stop learning. 55 years, I still learn new things, new techniques about different species from other people. Learning should never stop. And with bonsai, it doesn't have to.
Yeah, I love that about, it seems like there was something in the water or something like that, but you and Dave have a very similar mindset about that, about like, hey, even people at the top of the game in their respective areas, like being able to always have this mindset and humbleness to keep learning and developing, I think is a really admirable quality. So you guys were doing something right down there in the community.
Well, I had when I was young, I took art lessons, and I had an art teacher, and I never forget what she said to me one day, because I got very frustrated. We were painting some sort of landscape, and I had been working on it for weeks, going over to my art lessons every week, working on this painting. And I just told her one day, I said, I think it's time for me to quit art lessons. Why? Because I can't get this right. It's just not turning out right. I can't get it. And so, I think I should just quit. And she said, no, you see, that's the reason you should not quit. When you get to the point to where you realize you can't get any better, that's when it's time to go find something else to do. But until then, as long as you realize you can continue to improve and get better, then you need to stick with it, and you need to keep pushing yourself, and you need to keep driving yourself until you achieve it. And so I've never forgotten that. And I probably was 11 or 12 years old at the time, but I have never forgotten that. It meant so much to me. And I've tried to apply that to my bonsai. Still constantly work to get better. I look at years ago when I would look at trees that I did, I said, oh, this looks great. Oh, I did such a great job. And then I look at photographs of them years later, and I go, what a piece of trash that was. It's just, oh my God, I was terrible. So, you can always get better, and you always, thank goodness, if you stick with it, you can continue to improve. And having people around you who have the motivation and the drive to learn with you is half the battle. That's where a lot of your motivation comes from, I think.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I've been talking, podcast listeners are maybe going to get overwhelmed or bored of this topic, but what you were saying, I think, resonates really well with it. I've been asking people about, a lot of people have said to me, hey, there's some innate talent to becoming good at bonsai. Like, not everybody has it, and not everybody can be good at bonsai. But I'm curious I'm curious on your thoughts on that, based on what you just said. I was getting a much more optimistic view of, hey, like, as long as you have the ability to notice that you could be doing better, then you have the ability to improve. And maybe you're not going to improve at the same speed as someone else, but who maybe has this innate spark, right? But you can still improve. So yeah, I'm just curious in your perspective of kind of seeing people grow and yourself growing in bonsai over time. Like, how do you feel about that tenet?
Yeah. Well, it's true. It's true. Look, I'm an educator. I was a teacher. I became a principal. middle school for many years and retired as a middle school principal. I would see that in my students in the school. Some of them excelled in mathematics. It came naturally to them. I can't even balance my checkbook. But there were kids who were much brighter and much smarter than I could ever hope to be in mathematics or science or art, music. There are people who have innate talent in all sorts of areas. But just because that's true, that does not mean that through hard work and perseverance, you cannot achieve greatness yourself. You may have to work harder. You may have to work longer. It may take more effort. But if the desire is there, if the drive is there, you can achieve anything you want to achieve. It just takes vision. It takes hard work. It takes dedication. And you have to push yourself to learn and learn from others. You can't be of the opinion that I know everything or this person knows nothing. There's always things. Even my study group, we meet every month here at my house. There are sometimes they will say something or they will see something in a tree that I did not see. Like, that's very good. Yeah, you made me change my mind. I like your idea. But you have to push yourself and have that desire, to continually grow.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think that like growth mindset fits in really well with, or a lot of people who do bonsai or stick with it also have that growth mindset. There's something about like finding enjoyment in the growth and development of trees that kind of mirrors your personality, I think, if you end up enjoying bonsai and sticking with it. So it's a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, I guess, but it's a very interesting dynamic I've noticed.
Absolutely.
So, I'm curious about your thoughts on work and bonsai, not like doing bonsai work, but how did your relationship with bonsai change over time while you had a full-time career and then going through retirement and all that stuff? Like, did you find that you started to, like, as your ambitions in your career kind of peaked or went through these valleys, like you would kind of replace that with interest in bonsai or like time you spent on doing bonsai? Like, how did that change throughout your life, the amount of time you put towards your career and the amount of time you put towards bonsai?
Well, I think the passion for bonsai was always there, and I don't think that ever waned. The difficult part was in doing what I needed to do for my job and take care of my family, bring home a paycheck, put food on the table. But every spare moment that I had, apart from that, spent with bonsai, growing trees, experimenting on different species, traveling. My goodness, I would go to California. There were nurseries there that just variety of material was just phenomenal. Stuff that I would never see in Louisiana or anywhere in the South. And I would go to Walmart and I would buy huge suitcases and I would fill them up with plants. I would buy gigantic cardboard boxes and fill them with plants and ship them to myself when we left to fly home from California. Overnight delivery, UPS, so all of these things I continued to do while I was teaching, then while I became an administrator, and my wife was so supportive. They would drive me to a bonsai nursery in California. Her father lived out there, so we would go out there to see her family. And she would just drop me off at the nursery and just ask them, what time do you close? What time do you close? Because I know he'll be here all day. He will not get tired, and you will have to push him out the door when it's closing time. So I will come get him then. That's what and I was perfectly happy. I would go, if they might have, 100 Serayu Japanese maples. Well, I had to go through every one to find the one that I was going to throw into a suitcase and send back to New Orleans, along with, the double flowering pomegranate and the this and the that. So she was very supportive and put up with a lot of craziness on my part when it came to bonsai. I remember the very first time after we got married, and I had all of these trees and a hurricane was coming. And I said, I've got to bring all my trees inside. I can't leave these trees outside. So the bathroom was full of trees. The bathtub was full of trees. They were in the hallway. They were everywhere. And they were in a house probably for a week after the hurricane came. And then, you're cleaning up and whatnot. And I've got to set up the benches again and this. And she said, I love you and I love your trees, but don't ever ask me to bring these things into the house again. Because if I find one more lizard, snail, spider, you're going to be sleeping outside with these trees. So, I managed to figure out ways to keep them safe from then on. But other than that, that was the only negative experience that, that I ever had with Teresa and my trees. Putting this book together, she was wonderful. She would go out, I would say, oh, I need to get photographs of male flowers and female flowers on cypress trees. She would come, I'm going for a walk in the park. And she would come back and she says, okay, I found male and female flowers. Are any of these photographs good enough for your book? One day there was a place, there's a highway that goes through the swamp. And she went with me. I'm driving down the shoulder of this highway going like 3 miles an hour, and she's standing up in the bed of the pickup truck with her 35 millimeter camera, banging on the roof. So stop, back up 3 feet. I need to get a shot of this. And it was wintertime, and so I was trying to get the photographs of the structures, the branch structure of different types of flat tops, mature flat tops. So, God bless her. She puts up with a heck of a lot.
Yeah.
From me, but I couldn't have done any of it without her support.
That's pretty cool. I mean, Bonsai Spouse has definitely put up with a lot, but to hear about like her interest in it and the support, like that sounds priceless. That talking about the swamp. So I've done some collecting in the mountains out here in California, but I'm curious about like what does it look like collecting in the swamp? It's not a biome that I'm super familiar with. So I'm curious, like, you're going out there with boots and waders and, do you have to look out for crocodiles? Like, what does it look like collecting in the swamp versus, the mountains?
Yeah, it's different. It's very different. I've collected in a lot of different types of climates. I've collected in the plains of Oklahoma and Texas. Very, very different than around here. But yeah, it's if you do it at the right time of year, it's not bad, which is in the winter. So, late December through late January, even late February into late February, there's no mosquitoes. The snakes are all hibernating. The alligators are all hibernating. The water is low. So it's not bad. When you get into trouble is when you do stupid things like I have frequently done, which is to go scouting different areas in the springtime. That's when, and I always I tell my students all the time, don't you ever go into the swamp by yourself. I had a student one time who went in by himself and got lost. Didn't make it back to his truck until after midnight. I have gone in and I've had frightening experiences in there by myself at the wrong time of year. I was like, do as I say and not as I do. But yeah, it's very different. I find it incredibly beautiful and very peaceful in the winter time when there's no leaves on the trees, and it's very, very quiet. It can be depending on if you're collecting larger pieces, it can be a lot of work. But yeah, it's very different. But yeah, I always have to go with hip waders on or chest waders, depending on where I'm going or how deep the water can be. But and I've gotten into trouble a few times, but nothing that didn't wind up turning out okay, or I wouldn't be here.
Yeah, you're still here, exactly.
Yeah.
So are the trees usually submersed fully in water, and like how do you cut them out then if they are? You can't use power tools underwater, right? Or
no, I use a chainsaw.
Okay, it does fine in the okay.
Yeah, I use
a gas powered motor.
Well, I try not. I don't use a gas powered. I use battery operated chainsaw with a 20-inch bar. That's about the biggest. That's about the biggest bar I can purchase on a chainsaw that's battery operated. But that's all I need. But usually there's in the wintertime, that's the dry season. The water is down. That's at its lowest levels. And so it's when springtime comes and the spring rains come and the creeks fill up and the rivers keep and the snow melt from the north comes down the Mississippi and all of the creeks and rivers rise and then the water comes back into the swamp and that's when it can get a little hairy. But in the wintertime, yeah, it's not bad. In most places, the water might be just a few 6, 7, 8 inches deep. Sometimes it's deeper, depending on where you go. But a good come along tied to the tree, if it's a big tree, over to another one. I go with my chainsaw. I go around in cutting a nice cone, crank it over a little bit so I can get down to the tap root, and then there you go.
Off to the races.
Yeah.
Are they fairly, I mean, they're very hardy, right? So like with redwoods out here, you can kind of collect them with nothing, no roots basically. And then they'll, you just plop them in a pot eventually and they'll be fine. Is it kind of similar with bald cypress? Like,
yeah,
you
don't have to get this like big root ball or anything. And because they're growing in water, fibrous roots are coming right off of the trunk right there. So you don't need this big root ball. And then even after we collect them, we get one off, I'm taking the chainsaw and I'm cutting it flat off the bottom there. So there's just the surface roots and maybe, 3 or 4 inches of root ball is all that we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Throw it in the back of the truck and we're good to go.
Yeah, it's nice from a heaviness, like a weight perspective, not to have a ton of soil to bring along.
Oh my God. Like well, especially like you see when you're in the swamp, it's just like, I don't even know how to it's not really soil. It's just this spongy coffee ground muck that you're walking on. And you have to walk on the roots. You have to stay close to the trees. You don't dare cross open water. If there's any open water, it may look shallow and you may be fine. Then you take one step and you're up to your armpits and you're stuck. And so you stay close to the tree trunks. You're walking on the roots. But even then, there are holes. There are places all of a sudden you step and you're like, oh, geez, and then it's like sucking on your whole leg. You're trying to pull yourself out. It's like, but, it can be challenging. It can be challenging. But, boy, it's some of the material that...
Very cool trees.
Yeah.
Really cool trees coming out of there.
Yeah.
I wonder... Well, so one thing I was curious about on the bald cypress is what is the... I'm sure you get asked a lot, how do these do outside of their kind of native range? Like, do you hear of lots of people in California or Portland or Colorado or... other parts of the U.S. having bald cypress pretty successfully, or are there any like pitfalls that you've seen?
No, I think it's just figuring out like one of my students left here a couple of years ago and moved to Pennsylvania, and so he's like sending me pictures. He still calls. In fact, he called me today, but he sends me pictures of his bald cypress, buried in snow in Pennsylvania. And he's got more than one. He's got several bald cypress up there. But they're like so many other trees. I mean, their climate range is very adaptable. And the most important thing is giving them enough water. I mean, look at where they grow. They grow in the swamps. They grow in lakes and rivers. And so, as long as you give them, like any other tree, I suppose, what they need most, they're happy. They're happy and they're healthy. I went over to a guy's house one time and I was looking at his trees in his backyard and I was like, well, what's wrong with your bald cypress? Oh, it's August, this time of year, the leaves always turn kind of bronzy brown, looking like kind of a rust color. I said, no, they don't. That's not normal. Your tree is in stress. And all it needed was it needed more water. It wasn't. So a lot of times I, tell people, if you've got a small cypress in a smaller pot, that soil is going to dry out, especially if you have it in bonsai soil. Keep it in a tray of water. Let it soak up. Look, in the swamp, not an excessively large tree. A tree with a trunk diameter of about 11 inches, just still a young tree, 20 years old, will soak up 27 gallons of water a day. They need a lot of water to stay happy and to stay healthy. And so that, to me, is the most important thing that people need to understand about cypresses.
Yeah, that makes sense. Actually, funny story about that. With my tree that I got when I first started in Pennsylvania, I left on vacation for a week or 2 weeks or something, and my neighbor was watering my trees for me. And I came back and I was like, whoa, this looks really good. Like the cypress looks better than whenever I was caring for it. And, you know, he was watering it like really, really diligently, like multiple times a day. So he just watered it more than I was, and it was way healthier. So it's funny that I learned that lesson by going away and seeing how my care was lacking a little bit. So yeah, they definitely love that water. That's for sure.
Absolutely.
Alrighty. Well, this has been super fun. How can people who are listening kind of connect with you, or, where do you kind of point folks towards if they want to see more of your work or learn more from you?
Well, one way is with the Facebook group. There's a bald cypress bonsai Facebook group. People all over the world are posting their trees, posting their problems, their questions. I have this issue. What do I have? This is what my tree looks like. How would you style it? Usually I try to keep my opinions to myself because sometimes people get their feelings hurt. But if they're brave enough to ask, what would you do? Well, I certainly tell them, at least give them possibilities. Because with any tree, there's always possibilities. It's difficult to tell from one or two photographs about a tree. You really almost need to see it in person to really give a good analysis and give really good advice. But, you can still give people ideas and suggestions. I tried to make the book as thorough as I possibly could and cover not only bald cypress, but also pond cypress and Montezuma cypress, which I've come to love both of those species as much as the bald cypress. They're different in different ways, but still incredibly beautiful and diverse in the way that they can be styled. It's exciting, yeah.
Very cool. Anything you want to leave folks with in that vein?
I think that probably the thing that we are probably most lacking in, and this is something that I discovered as I set about trying to write this book, we don't do enough in-depth research on particular species of trees. If you want to know, how to design and how to take care of crepe myrtle, read articles, read research about crepe myrtles. Don't depend on bonsai books that are talking in generalities and giving you lots of pretty pictures. That's not really how you're going to find out about specific species. And let's face it, every species is different. They all require they come from different environments. They have different physical requirements. There are different pests and diseases that can affect them. There's different ways to prune them. Some will respond well, others not so well. Same with the roots. So, if you're going to be really serious about a particular species, you need to start investing some time reading and researching about their needs, not just as bonsai, but just as trees, as plant material.
Interesting.
I mean, that's how you get, there are books out there, several books just on Japanese black pine. Well, because there's a lot to learn about pruning. Dennis Makishima was an excellent bonsai artist and really an expert on Japanese black pine. And he told me once, he said, there are over 200 documented methods of candle pruning and pinching Japanese black pine. They all achieve the same result in the end, but there are slight variations in the way that people go about it. And when you start reading and researching, not just about Japanese black pine or bald cypress, but any tree, that you're really interested in. I think that's the thing that's going to help people the most be more successful. You have to understand the tree's needs and the way it grows in order to keep it healthy and happy and create better bonsai.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that's something that's a little eye-opening for me, because that's not the first thing you think of whenever you're doing bonsai. You're like, oh, I'm just going to copy this very contextual information from Japan of like, do this at this time of year. And maybe it's a little bit different time of year for me in my climate, but there are these established pathways, and I don't think they teach it in that way in Japan. They're not like, oh, this is a Japanese maple. This is, we're doing this at this time because it's responding to this hormone change or something like that, right? But can you give us that's a very intriguing thought, though, and it makes a lot of sense intuitively, where it's like, hey, if I really want to grow redwoods in my garden, then I probably should research not just like techniques that you do for pruning redwoods from bonsai. I also should research redwood trees, right? And see what I can kind of build as a framework around them, taking my knowledge of bonsai plus my knowledge of these horticultural concepts from
because you're trying to build a foundation, a base from which you can launch your bonsai. Again, not just based upon what other bonsai artists say about this, but look at people who actually do research. People who actually, their doctoral thesis is studying this or how it reacts in this environment. So I think there's a lot to be said for that. That was one thing that I also appreciated greatly about Vaughn, because he was a horticulturalist, and he always talked about plant physiology. Sometimes it was over my head, but I learned that from him as well, that you really need to research. You need to know all there is to know about a particular tree if you're going to be more successful at it. Because how many times do we kill something without even having a clue as to why it died? It's not the tree's fault. It's our fault. So what did we do, or what did we fail to do that caused that tree to die?
Yeah.
Something that we missed, something that we weren't doing correctly. And so the more research you do in general terms, not just about bonsai, is going to help you.
Interesting. I really enjoy reading and trying to apply knowledge from general horticultural best practices and like studies done for agriculture to bonsai. But it's tough sometimes, right? Because it's not the same conditions exactly, right? Mm-hmm. Often those are different species. I don't see a lot of like corn or soybean bonsai out there, right? So it's like the ideas aren't always the same. Can you give an example from whenever you were researching cypresses where you found something interesting and how it was cross applicable to bonsai? Because I'm sure that would be very interesting to folks to hear how that kind of external knowledge can be put into practice from a bonsai perspective, or how it can shape your thoughts on how to do bonsai.
Well, there's not a lot of people in the bonsai community, when it comes to bald cypress, that grow knees. They will sometimes try to collect a tree because it has a knee attached to it, but they don't know how to grow them. And unfortunately, a lot of times when they collect a tree that has a knee already attached, it's, in terms of scale, it's typically out of scale. By the time you create the bonsai, this knee is too huge. So for me, I learned how to grow my own knees on my bald cypresses. I have one bald cypress that I chose not to grow any knees on. And that's the only reason I did that is because the tree is maybe only about 2.5, 3 inches in diameter at the base. And so because I know that growing a knee or knees on a bald cypress, you have no control over the size it's going to be. And 99% of the time, it's not going to be in scale with the tree. I had a student who we worked on her bald cypress for several, and she insisted on growing it in this 5-gallon nursery pot that she would then just sit in a bucket to keep the water level up to the soil. And she was so tickled one year because it had finally developed a knee. The trunk of the tree was maybe like 2.5 inches in diameter, but She had kept it small. She worked on it for years in this stupid nursery pot. I could not convince her to put it in a bigger container. I said, no, this is just the right size for me to carry. Well, then put it in a bonsai pot, for goodness sake. No, I want to develop a knee. So, but when the knee developed, it was like 4 inches across. And she was happy that she had the knee, but she was so upset because now it was this like monstrous, Godzilla knee next to this little tree. It's okay. It's all right. Calm down. It'll be okay. Remember, the knee, like every other part of the tree, has a cambium layer. Carve it down, grind it down, put some cut paste till you get to the size you want it. Just carve it down on one side, and it will callus over and heal, and then the knee will be in proportion to the tree. So she was happy. But most people do not develop knees. They don't know how to do that. That's something that that I've been talking with my students about for years, and helping people to understand how to achieve that and how to go about it. A lot of people don't like the knees. That's okay. That's fine. I do, because when I think of a bald cypress in the swamp, that's what I think of.
It's got knees.
Exactly. It's got the knees. It's got the fluted base, the buttressing, and so forth. So that's, to me, that's what transports me mentally into that swamp, is when I see my trees and I have knees.
Absolutely.
All around the base. But you cannot control the size of them. That's the problem.
And that came from your research. Like the ability to create that came from you researching.
Some of it because there's no research out there on how to grow knees. There's only research out there on the function of knees, the purpose of them. And even that is like, you're in for a nightmare trying to wade through all of that. They've been trying to figure that out since the 1800s. And it's only been within the past 5 years or so that they're starting to really get a good handle on the function of knees. But this is a species that goes back 265 million years. It's a species that has been around like ginkgo since the dinosaurs roamed the earth. And so it may even be that the original function of knees is no longer applicable today because of genetic drift over the millennia since these species has been in existence. But today, there are a few specific functions of knees. But in terms of developing them and growing them in bonsai, that's just something that came about through my own experimentation. And just understanding that I can look in my neighborhood. In high ground, they don't grow knees. When the water table is 6-8 feet below the ground, they grow knees, but they're very short, 6-8 inches tall on a big full-size tree. In the swamp, where the water is deeper, the knees grow taller. There's a lake in the central part of Louisiana that has the Corps of Engineers built floodgates and a dam, and every year they fill it up it's on the main flyway for ducks, and it's like a duck hunting mecca. And so they fill up this lake, and for 6 months out of the year, the water is 20, 30 feet deep. And then they drain the lake. During the summer, they let the grasses grow on the lake bed so the ducks have something to feed in the fall. But what we see is that the buttressing on these bald cypress are 20 feet up in the air.
Wow, that's so cool.
Because that's where the water level is. And the knees are very tall because that's where the water level is. Where the water level is low, the knees don't have to grow very tall. Or where the water level is below ground, like I said, the knees may only be a few inches.
Yeah, and by researching the species, not just from a bonsai, because you would never have found that in a bonsai book,
no.
Right? That would never have existed.
No.
So by researching the trees and experimenting and having that outlook on bonsai that kind of combines those two disciplines, you were able to accomplish that. Yeah. That's very cool. I really appreciate you sharing that story and definitely giving me some more stuff to read, I guess, more research papers to dive into.
You're right.
Thank you, Randy. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. This was a lot of fun for me, so I hope you had fun too.
Oh, absolutely.
And, I hope we get to meet in person someday too. So hopefully we'll see you at one of these bonsai events here coming up. So
that'd be fabulous.
Yeah. Thank you, Randy. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, Addison. Thanks for inviting me.